Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for showing up on a Saturday morning. It's hard for some of us to be awake right now, so it's great to see you all. I have been looking forward to this panel for a really long time, not only as being a woman in film, but because it's a topic that's fascinating, and we're lucky to have some extraordinary guests. I'm not going to talk about them, though, yet. I'm going to save that. But I just want to talk about our moderator. We are thrilled to be having the maven of NHPR, the voice of word of mouth, the ninth of 11 children who grew up in a house where movies were her escape. And I relate to that because I'm the third of 7 children, all of which are here right now for this weekend, which is, they're all scattered around, so you'll see multiple copies of me. And no, you're not hallucinating yet. So I'm very, very thrilled to please welcome Virginia Prescott.
Thank you. Good morning. You will be really glad to know that my family is not here at the festival. I will just tell you that much. A couple of things, orders of business to get out of the way first. We want to acknowledge that there is a photo exhibit that's in here and outside in the reception area. And this exhibit is an acknowledgement of the 20th anniversary of the genocide in Rwanda this month. And the connection here to the films is that there's a film, Watchers of the Sky, a documentary that's going to be playing tonight at the festival, and it's about Raphael Lemkin. He's the Nuremberg lawyer who actually coined the term genocide. And these photographs are for sale, and the profits go to genocide prevention and to the Monadnock Film Festival. So just to let you know, put that in a little bit of context. I am not going to read the long bios of all of these distinguished women not because I want to take anything away from them, but we have so much to cover and their full bios are inside of your programs. I will just do brief ones. We have many geniuses in the room. One of them is officially acknowledged to be one by the MacArthur Fellow. Edith Bellsberg, whose films include Children Underground and The Recruiter, recently on HBO. I told you I'm giving you a very brief bio of these ladies. And also, if you think the casting of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, among other films, was genius, you can thank Ronnie Yesko. We also have the beautiful mind of Anna Culp, who worked her way up through the film industry and is now the senior vice president of motion pictures at Imagine Entertainment. And she also did work on Beautiful Mind, 8 Mile, and The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, among others. And extremely au courant is Claire Serra, whose film Blended with, she's a screenwriter and an actress you might recognize from The Princess Diaries and Princess Diaries 2, for example. And her film Blended, starring Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler, New Hampshire's own Adam Sandler, is going to be opening this month. So, I'm going to be, everyone now and again, checking my phone for the time here. We do want to move through this quickly. We have so many questions that we want to ask these women, and of course, open some time up for questions for all of you. But I'm just going to start with something that I read recently. Dr. Martha Lozerne, she does what they call the celluloid ceiling blog, and at the beginning of each year, she goes through 250 current films and counts how many women worked on the film especially behind the scenes of the film, and reports at the beginning of this year that there has been no progress for 16 years. And in fact, it's gotten worse. And this is at a time when so many women are entering the film industry. So, we hear a lot about women in Hollywood, and oftentimes it's for the people in front of the stage, that there are no roles for women. It used to be, I guess, over 35. Now it's like 26, I think, for the most part. But this year, when Cate Blanchett accepted her Academy Award, she thanked Sony Pictures for distributing this film so aggressively and said, I want to make sure I got this right, for bravely, intelligently distributing the film to audiences who went to see it, and perhaps those of us in the industry who are still foolishly clinging to the idea that female films with women at the center are niche experiences. we tend to hear about women in Hollywood. It almost becomes white noise at a certain point. You know, there aren't enough women in Hollywood doing enough things. So we're going to hear from some women who are doing great things, how they got there, and how they can actually help change the system. So with that, I don't know who wants to begin. You know, of course, in Hollywood and in filmmaking in general, not just Hollywood, the story is of how you got your first big break, and especially with so few female mentors in the system. Would just like to ask all of you that. I don't know who would like to begin.
I'll begin.
Go ahead.
Want me to begin? Is this on? No. Well, the reason I want to begin actually is because the reason I'm here is actually Lisa Neville, who gave me my first break in Hollywood. I was 17 years old and a senior in high school. And don't cry. This is exciting. This is fun.
So female.
It's right, exactly. And so it's really exciting because I got very, very lucky to be a young, curious mind at 17 who knew nothing about the film business, did not grow up around it, had no one that I knew in my family associated with it. And so there was this great opportunity to kind of be a little set rat. And Lisa just took me under her wing. And I learned so much from her over the course of 4 years of college. Every summer I would come home and work as her assistant and like do anything and everything. So it was wonderful. And I had an amazing mentor in Lisa, and it translated through, it has through the rest of my career. I have been very fortunate, actually. Funny enough, we talk about the women in Hollywood thing so much, but right after college, moved out to LA and was fortunate enough to get an interview at Imagine, where I've been my whole career. And the company, to this day, actually, is female-dominated. And Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, who run the company, are very, very supportive of women. When I started, a woman who was 35 years old was running the company for them. And to this day, the presidents are still women. And so I feel like I've been really fortunate to be around incredibly smart, powerful, strong women with amazing men who have supported them. So I feel like I'm a rarity, and unfortunately, and the great thing is every time I tell my story anywhere, people are amazed, and I feel like I have to pay it forward all the time. So I'm always having kind of interns, assistants, anybody I can, any women, young girls that are in college that don't know anything. It's like, bring them in. Who can come work with us and learn more? So I feel lucky.
Claire, you look like you were ready to.
Well, I had a mentor. After I slept with him the first time, he agreed. I came up in a sort of male-dominated in comedy, in the comedy world, in the world of improv especially. In fact, my friend Morgan and I were the only two females in our comedy world at that time. In fact, it was so hard. We started a class for females only, an improv group for females, just a class to teach them, because when the men were present, they just naturally stepped back, and because women have a different rhythm. It's a different approach and a different rhythm. It's not worse. It's better. It's not better. It's much better. It's just different, and so I think that was great training for me to get used to the rhythm of men and feel comfortable enough in myself where I felt like I could let my voice be heard. And so when I moved out to Hollywood, I had a great mentor, and he was male, mostly male. And well, he actually has a strong feminine side. And so he really led me through. And I think also just for myself as a woman, it was really helpful for me to be under someone's shadow, as you were with Lisa, for the first little while. Because again, as a female, we're innies and they're outies. And you can trademark that. So I was able to watch how the business treated him before I had to do that on my own, take meetings on my own, take notes on my own, and I saw that, and it's still, there are amazingly powerful women, but I still feel like the majority of meetings I take are male-dominated even still, and I still work in comedy, so that might be a little bit of it. But I sort of watched from his shadow. It's like, okay, this is what happens, so it's not personal to me when it happens to me at a meeting. This is just what it is. So I figured out an armor to wear for that.
I have to say my experience is incredibly different just because, and I think subconsciously maybe I did this intentionally, even only realizing it now, but for documentaries, as long as you can get a camera and an airplane ticket, if you need one, then you can really start. And so early on, I knew I wanted to go into storytelling, but I wasn't sure exactly what. But then, of course, I was pulled towards specific stories. But, I could cobble together a little bit of money and a small crew, and then we can start, and then you can raise the money incrementally, unlike putting together a motion picture, a large, narrative motion picture. So my experience is different. It's just about, going to do it. So I applaud you guys because it's a very different experience.
I started off wanting to be an actor and was living in DC and started in production and started taking acting lessons and everything for a few years in DC, and then I stage managed a play in DC that was a hit and moving off Broadway, and I thought I would become a great actor. And as I told Claire, that if somebody was waiting for me at the Lincoln Tunnel and telling me how to be an actor, I'd probably still be an actor, but I didn't know how to begin in New York. And then a friend said, you'd be a great casting director, and I thought, oh, let me try it. And so I sent that out and resumes out and landed up with a woman who was a pretty good mentor, not a great mentor. She was a little off the wall. And but I learned some stuff, and then I went with somebody else who was just starting to be very big in the business, and she was unfortunately crazy, but she knew her stuff, and I learned a lot from her, and left to go off on my own. And I think what made me a really good casting director was that I went to the theater every night and learned my craft. And learned the actors in New York. And every night I would go, and it was great. And it was how I built my foundation and learned what was good and how to find great actors. And it led me to great stuff in LA. Because I was coming in the 5th season of LA Law to cast it. And they had used every actor in LA, and you couldn't repeat. And so I brought a whole new coast with me, which was great. And it was just a very exciting time.
I'm glad you're addressing craft, Ronnie, because, of course it is about the work that people are doing, but it's still, especially in Hollywood, and it is a different experience. I'd love to get to that, about independent films versus the system. But the system still, it's so broken that many people have pointed out that the Directors Guild of America created this women's steering committee, to discuss this. And here's a quote from one of the meetings at the Women's Steering Committee. "Let's make this clear. I am not here as one of you. I'm one of the boys, okay?" Now this idea, for real, my hand to God, I wasn't there, but somebody was. Lainey Alexander, actually, the director, captured that quote. But the whole idea that if I wallow in womanliness and sort of bringing up women in film, then I am derailed, then I am considered less than. I'm not a player anymore. And I'd love to know how you all negotiate that. Anna, do you want to start? I know you work at a very female-centric, as you said, organization, but how does that manifest? How do you think that operates differently?
I think that from the beginning I've been encouraged to have a voice, and actually it took me a long time actually to do that. I am lucky enough, but have felt the push and pull. Women actually are incredibly competitive and in a very different way. So you have to really try to find your own voice, and you can look to other women, other men. I think it's very common to have, strong men mentors as well, and I think that's incredibly important. It's funny because I'm on the studio side, so I started thinking about it, and I do think that the issue of having women around, it's funny, 5 of the 7 major studios have women running them. So it's actually an anomaly. You kind of look at a set and screenwriters, directors, and you kind of go, where are all these women and why aren't we hiring more of them? And it's something we talk about a lot, and it's, I look at like a woman like Catherine Bigelow. I love that she defies kind of everything that the movies she makes are so manly, you know, and that's what everyone thinks, oh, she's so tough and great, good for her, but that's the story she loves to tell. So we need to just keep finding the voices. I think telling the stories and finding the people that are passionate about whatever story it is they want to tell. And I came out of Sundance this year actually, and many of the films I loved were female directors, and those were the first meetings I set. So it's incumbent on me and my peers to make sure I am meeting all of the strong new female voices that are writers, that are directors, that are, you know, you find, I'm lucky enough to work at a company where, you know, I get to see something I love, I can bring them in for a meeting, what do we want to do together? Let's find something that makes sense for Imagine or whatever it is. So I am very focused on trying to further that, because a good storyteller is a good storyteller. So, you know, you have to look at it and go, okay, make sure, I tell my assistant, I do want these. It goes for women and minorities, actually, for me. I really want there to be a level playing field. And so you have to be very aware of it all the time. And so I look at these strong women running studios. Well, you know what? 40% of the movies that, or rather, last year of the movies, you know, there's this thing that, only the big, you know, set PC action movies work. Well, you look at things like Hunger Games female lead, but then you look at Bridesmaids, Marigold Hotel, like all these, actually, the loyal audiences are female. There are, you know, 40% of the regular movie going audience is female. So let's keep making movies for those people. So it's both, I think, making sure women are behind the camera, in front of the camera, that we're delivering for women audiences. So I think it runs the gamut, and I think that's a big part of things I think about every day. And I think that's, the more we talk about it and the more you actually just put it into practice, the better.
How about the others, the kind of idea that, you know, obviously identifying that there are so many talented women out there, but the idea that they feel this pressure, or maybe you felt this kind of pressure to sort of, it's better to be in the boys club because that way you get recognized, you get brought along. You're part of the entourage, so to speak.
I think part of that is that it's the only club. So it's like you want to be in the club that is actually getting something done. So that's the club to belong to. And I think that it's incredibly crazy to me that we do have the heads of our studios right now. And they are incredible women. They're
Incredible.
so smart. And but they're not hiring more. We are seeing less females, as you're saying, because they are working very hard to stay in that club and to stay strong and to stay on top. And I think that women do, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, they need more nurturing than a man does to continue to stay at that level, you know, of BS that goes on in the politics at that level. And, you know, I think actually what Anna just said is the right thing. We need to keep talking about it and reminding each other to give, we as women need to give other women second and third chances. It's not, they can't just have one chance and gone, because for some reason it just takes them just a little bit longer to break in, and they just, in general, you know.
In casting, women have mostly dominated the field, and it's only recently that men,
Why do you think that is, Romy?
because we're more intuitive.
Yeah.
And I think that casting is a very intuitive way of thinking. I mean, it's just, when I'm casting a project, I feel it. When an actor comes in, I know if he's right or wrong, but just my gut. And I trust that. And I think women are more prone to that. And not to say that men aren't, but it's just a field that has attracted more women, more acceptable. But we haven't, it's interesting, we haven't been able to get into the academy. We just got into the academy, a branch of the academy, but we're not able to be nominated for an Academy Award because of the Directors Guild. They won't let us in.
Maybe we should address that to the steering committee of the Directors Guild. But Ronnie, obviously in casting, you have roles and they're usually clearly gender divided. But I'm just wondering about your own sense of, like Anna said, getting interns, hiring people who are young aspiring women. I wonder how you can pass that on as a director, or do you feel that responsibility? I mean, a casting director rather. How does that work for you? You're in very stringent kind of gender roles.
But not necessarily, because not all roles are, need to be men. And if it's not a particular thing, why can't this role be a woman? And that's suggested all the time.
We did it, in fact, actually. Flight Plan, which was a Jodie Foster film, was written as a male lead.
Yeah.
And Jodie came along, and that was it. She walked in the room and said, "Why not me?"
Right.
And then it was rewritten for her. That's actually a very important way of thinking too. It's like you look at a script and you think, well, there's no real reason that it has to be a man. And it's a great opportunity to.
Right.
Live
Why
like
does
that.
it have to be a white man, or why couldn't it be a black woman? Or, so we think that way all the time, trying to get out of the box.
Edith, I'm afraid you're sort of representing for the non-Hollywood kind of, but it does obviously take it takes initially a plane ticket and a camera, right? But there's funding, there's distribution. Is there a male preferential system in the field that you're working in?
No, I luckily can make the decisions in terms of who's hired, and we for this film, which we had a very large crew. It was mostly women. I mean, my editors were both women. Most of my executive producers are women. My producers are women. Interns and associate producers and assistant editors. Really, it's mostly women. And I have to say that I do take an enormous amount of pride when we get a number of young interns, and most of them are women. And I don't love anything more, I think, than telling a good story. But then having a young intern and see her become our assistant editor, and then our editor, and then and working with us for years. And that's something that early on I knew I wanted to do, because I didn't really have that. I just kind of started, and then it was really trial and error. And to see someone come in, and then for her to leave, and and then to take another job and to really grow. I mean, we've had that happen a few times, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's something that means so much to me. And just last night. Actually, not last night, the night before. A young woman, 22 years old, emailed me. She was doing she's doing a paper for school, and she asked if she can interview me. And she said that she wanted to go into documentaries, and that everyone was dissuading her because it's so difficult and there's no money and this and that. But she really had a passion for it, and she really had a passion for telling stories. And and I can see, I was like, my God, come to our office, come, intern with us. And I would, there's nothing more than I'd like to kind of foster that and to help. And foster them and see a young woman grow as much as possible. So that's important to me.
How about the rest of you, that idea of, do you feel a responsibility to bring younger women along, or to kind of welcome them to the set, or welcome them into your business? And what does that responsibility mean? I know that I've read and heard of a lot of minority actors feeling like, oh, if I'm the only Asian American, African American, Native American on the set, there is an additional pressure looking at me. It's not just me as an actor, I'm representative of other. And I wondered if any of you had experienced that.
I mostly try to keep those other bitches off the set.
Hold in the claws, sister. Anna, could you please pick it up from there?
Blair. It's really interesting, actually. I think, especially on set. I just came out from a film, and 4 of the 8 producers / executive producers are women, and that felt really, really good. And the 2 main producers, I have an exec producer on the movie, and the 2 main producers who are women. continue to, even in my world, they continue to support, encourage. I'm at the table, I'm in the meetings now, and finally, I'm kind of taking that next step in my career, and they make sure to, when discussing things, Anna, what do you think? Including people. And I actually did the same. Our line producer is an executive producer, she's a woman, and it was a very male-centric movie. And she is taking on a new role, trying to be more of a creative producer versus a line producer. And so in those meetings, I found myself also going, well, Trish, what do you think? And so you have to just continue to, it's all about always growing from each experience. Like I always joke, even though I've been at the same job for a long time, that no job is a bad experience. Even if it is the worst experience of your life, you have to have learned something from it. Even if it's what you don't want to do, if you never want to write something again, you never want to meet that actor again, you have to say, okay, well, I learned that about myself. And so I think if you're continuing to push yourself in all of those ways, you're aware of everyone else in the room. And I think it is absolutely, again, incumbent on us to go, okay, what do you think about this? I actually think that a lot about male and female at my company. I have been kind of put in charge of the assistants are stepping into a new role of being very vocal in our creative meetings. And because it's a whole new generation of kids that have incredible voices, that have access to so much material. If you're persistent, if you are reaching out, someone can find my email, reach out to me, and I try to always say yes, even if it is 10 minutes of my day. You know what I mean? Because just even getting someone in the door and hearing a little bit, I think can be helpful. So I think, yeah, absolutely, you have to keep just hopefully opening those doors, because it's the only way someone's going to learn. It's going to give them the confidence that, okay, maybe, well, at least I got 5 minutes of her time, maybe I'll get 5 of someone else's, and I'll learn something else from that. So I think absolutely being self-aware enough to know that you're learning every time, and hopefully you're giving that paying it forward. So.
I just want to say there too, I think what Anna is demonstrating, showing, not telling, good movie maker, is a competence and a confidence. And I mean, obviously, I think all of us bristle a little bit about all the minority groups that we are, and women, because, you know, whatever. And because you get the sense too, obviously, it's not just any woman. It's a woman who's competent and confident and is good at what she does. All these women have worked so hard to get where they are, and it takes a certain type of personality, not just being a woman. It's not like give any woman a leg up, or, you know, any minority a leg up, or it has to be somebody who is going to be competent and confident and has the skill and the craft and has done the work and has proven themselves. So there's also this sense of, and I feel some pushback at times, you know, about any, you know, kind of club like we're forming of women and women power. And I think the resentment comes from people getting the sense that, oh, she got the job because she's a woman, not because she's a competent, confident person. And that's kind of a little tough arena. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even when we were putting together this panel, the whole idea of like, oh, women in film. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Again, we're hearing this story, and there's oftentimes these kind of things devolve into a sort of like, oh, woe is me. This is what we've got to do. But I think that the numbers are real. Let's put it that way. And you guys are all describing something that sounds like, yes, we're doing this, and we're bringing other women up, you know, from below. We're sort of taking them with us. But we've talked a little bit about you saying, you know, Sundance, you walk away from there thinking there are great storytellers out there who are women. So why are they not getting the funding? Why are they not getting the job? And I was reading something about, you know, that the question in Hollywood is often, where are all the women? Which is one of the things that Anna mentioned. And trying to shift that question to why isn't anybody trying to solve this problem, I guess. And I just wonder if you feel like that is actively being pursued, or that women are still at the stage of sort of saying, like, congratulating themselves for, we're here, we're in it, you know, that's great. But how about the rest? I know that was a long rambling thing to say, but I'm wondering if we can get to the other part of it. Like, is there something actively being done about it, or is there the sort of, phew, I'm at this level, thank goodness, you know? my influence can help other people, but looking at the sheer numbers, is that being done?
I do have one experience that I'd like to share. My next film, or one of the films that I'm developing right now, one is a narrative, and I met with a good friend of mine who's an executive in one of the companies, and I talked to him about the story, and it's a strong female lead, and without reading it, without talking about it, he said, oh my God, it's an incredible story, but it's a woman. Now, and he said, you're not going to, and he said, what are you seeing as a budget? And I told him budget, really, for now, it is a higher budget. And he said, with a female lead, I don't see you getting this budget. And he said, is there any, and he literally asked, is there a way that you would want to make this a male lead? Do you know the story, would the story still hold? And literally the story would implode. So that was, and this is a good friend of mine, and this is someone who has been supportive in my career for a very long time. And so that was a very, eye-opening experience, and it was something that, oh my God, and it didn't give me a feeling of, all right, I've got to find those women, we've got to do this in another way, and to build that community, and it did make me feel, okay, the way I've built that community in the documentary film world, there must be a way, and there is clearly a way, because women are doing it to build it in the world, to break down those numbers. But so that's the ideal, the practical is still yet to be seen and to heard.
Yeah, I think about the compromises, because that is the thing, it's like once you've made it to a certain level, you have to maintain it. I mean, you can't pretend you're not living in the world you're living in. And I've had the same thing of, this has to be a male lead, for whatever the demographics, right? Especially this has changed though. This was probably about 10 years ago. Well, in kids' films, it had to be a boy, in the lead of a family film, and so I did change it. But because it's like, all right, well, that's also partly a capitalist society and a capitalist, it's a job, and there is this sort of like, well, if I'm going to maintain and keep this work and get this job, all right. I didn't have a story that was said about a boy or a girl, but they just wanted male leads, because that way you get the boys and the girls, rather than.
There still is that, and then I'll stop, but there still is that misconception. Even with this film, one of the characters in my film said, the boyfriends aren't going to go to this. The girlfriends aren't going to be able to convince their boyfriends to go to. I'm like, what? What planet? I mean, that women are making their choice, and we do see those numbers now for films, as Anna was mentioning, where women are making up the vast majority of viewers. For some reason that's overlooked.
But they're not the global blockbusters that,
Right,
in
that's right.
China they're not going to see women's films. They're
That's right.
seeing the things where lots of things blow up.
I think sometimes I get frustrated too, though, because women also go to the blockbuster films. I mean, women like to go to the superhero movies. It's not like women only like
Right.
chick flicks,
No, absolutely.
Right, yeah.
I think the shift in technology is actually going to continue to even the playing field, honestly, because there's so much about studio-driven movies that are based on opening weekend numbers that's all they look at. So if it doesn't open, your movie's a failure. Whereas, and honestly, a lot of these female movies, you maybe open them on a fewer number of screens, a little smaller platform, and they hold on. They tend to not fall off second, third, fourth weekend. So female audiences, I mean, really, if you break it down and look at it, it's, sure, a lot of mothers, a lot of, they can't get out for opening weekend night, but they show up second, third, fourth weekend. And I think twofold. I think there's been a shift in general. I think the recession has caused a lot of men their jobs. A lot of women. I know many families who women are the primary breadwinners now, and that I think all of those cultural shifts. And in association with, I think, a shift in technology, and as we continue to embrace what it means to be on a big screen versus how people are really digesting entertainment is not just in movie theaters anymore. And so it's kind of like a Nielsen box. Like why are we still judging TV ratings with a Nielsen box? Because it's so antiquated. So I think as we continue to figure out what the new platforms are, those numbers shift, and hopefully there will be attention paid to who is watching them, who is digesting them, and how it works. And I think especially for me at studio heads, what Claire said earlier too is important, because there is a lot of, I'm here, I have to protect that I'm still here, and I can't get kicked out. And I had a very different experience in that the first movie I ever worked on as an executive, I was in a room with a very big actor, Ron Howard, and I was very nervous to give my first kind of creative ideas. And Ron just looked at me and said, there are no bad ideas, because they eventually lead to good ones. So this is a safe environment. And so I think that's also very important, and I think a lot of women that are running studios, I think it's hard to actually do that. I think it is harder because in order to succeed, you have to let go of fear of failure. I think you have to be able to push forward, and I think creating those safe environments is key to doing that. Sorry, there are like 4 ideas and whatever I'm saying right now, but so I think like all of those things are challenging, and again, it's about not feeling like if I make one mistake, I'm going to lose the job. But the truth is the system I work in, that's exactly how it works. If a studio movie fails and you are responsible for it, you lose your job. I mean, it really is kind of fast turnaround, and so I think it's hard to be able to go, hey, I want to be really collaborative and think about you, and sure, be fearless and try things. So it's still a very corporate system, which is very hard in a creative business. So it's all of these things are pieces of the puzzle that I think are changing, I hope, but I think you have to continue to really like advocate for them.
You know what I think? Oh, go ahead. I wonder if you come across this too. It's hard to write female characters. They're they're hard to write. Men, whatever. It's like, they go shoot something. I mean, no, I'm kidding. Men are just as difficult, of course, but in a different way. Because, and I keep generalizing, and of course there's differences and nuances, but women are such processors in general, and so internal, and it's hard to get the types of contradictions that women just deal with constantly, and the way that a female character is on paper can come across as too confusing or not consistent, or it's hard to create a female character that is as compelling as a female actually is. And some women do it beautifully, and we are getting better at it, I think, as we're allowing more space for it, because culturally things are changing, so we allow more space in the films for it. But they're hard to write, I find.
They're sometimes hard to cast. Yeah.
Yeah,
they
Well, we
are.
saw that in the film last night. So much that was going on with Sophie
Yes,
was internal.
yeah.
Yeah.
All that space.
I just realized, not just, but of the 8 movies that I'm working on in various stages of development, there's one movie that has a female lead.
Well, that's interesting.
And everything else is male. But looking for when they want beautiful women who are smart and funny, it's hard to find that combination, that are really layered and textured and have 3D just personalities and are real people. It's just hard to find. And there's so much face work going on in LA that I've had actors come in and I thought, it's frightening. It's really scary.
They can't emote anymore. They can't.
No, they can't move.
Yeah, period.
They can't move. It's so scary. So to find those really genuine and beautiful and talented women is you have to look far and wide.
Well, I remember seeing the sessions and thinking, oh, Helen Hunt, who remembered, you know what I mean? That they sort of disappear. And this leads to something else. More young women are going into the film business than men. But at age 50, it completely levels off. So there is this kind of idea of there's an expiration date in Hollywood, especially for women. And I know, of course, we've heard a lot about this on women on the other side of the camera, in front of the camera, the actors. I'm wondering if you guys perceive that as well and see it.
I don't know what you're talking about. What?
I know know an ingenue like you, Claire, wouldn't know. But maybe others have ideas or have seen it happen.
I'm actually seeing the opposite. I'm seeing so many women with whom I work in all levels, really integrating their family life more and more and more. I mean, it's just become so normal. We could be on a conference call with men where a woman is dealing with her 5-year-old, and it's like 1 second I have to do this, or the family life is really incorporated into our work structure, and I think. I do see that more and more on many different levels, and that's something that I hope continues, so that leveling off doesn't have to happen, But I'm seeing actually that, and men too. I mean, men more and more are saying, I just got an email. Can we schedule it? I have to feed my boys. You know what I mean? And that's more and more, and I love that. I think it's really fantastic. So I hope that continues.
I had a when I was doing LA Law, I had my kid, in the office, and she'd be there.
And that was accepted there.
Yeah.
Well, I think also more and more, again, this goes to technology. I think people are much more accustomed to multitasking now and much more accepting of it. I think everyone is constantly, it's not offensive to be on your BlackBerry in the middle of a meeting anymore. It's really bizarre, which when I was coming up, of course you did not bring your phone into a meeting, but now it is completely acceptable. So I think those things are, those walls are coming down. I also think film is still very hard. I think where it's really changing is television. I do actually think the great older female roles in particular are on TV. And it speaks a little bit to what Claire is saying, is that I think you have the time and space to develop characters and live with them. And so again, as there's so much blending now, a feature film, sure it's 2 hours and we all work in features, but now there are great event series. You can do something in 8 hours or 10 hours. And I think so many of these roles are now being written for women because you have the time and space to deal with them. And I think that will help the perception. But I definitely think there is an inordinate amount of pressure on how you look. Absolutely still. It's not even just about film, it's about Us Weekly and about, there are just things like what we're following and what we care about as a society has to change. And I think, the reason that is perpetuated is because people buy into it and people that, and the more and more I see these young girls that say, I don't want to be airbrushed. I don't want to be, I love that. Like Jennifer Lawrence, it should be a great female role model. She is not afraid to fall down,
it's so
be
brave.
ridiculous.
It's so brave at 20 to not be airbrushed. I just want to say that,
Not everyone is as beautiful as you, Claire.
Well, what you're speaking to are opportunities, and you mentioned it before with the technology and the erosion of the studio system as we've known it in the past, and that sort of almighty power has changed. So where are the opportunities? And I'm not just talking about for women in film, but in film in general. That if the studios are not dominating anymore, independent filmmakers are. There's a great proportion of them who are women, for example. Mm-hmm. Television, you mentioned.
Well, I can only speak by example. I think that I had a book that I developed for and with Ron to direct. That Noah Baumbach, was a very talented screenwriter, wrote for and adapted. And it was very in the heyday of buying books at a studio and spending a lot of money, and it's a wonderful small story, but we could never put it together for the budget. It was right as kind of the shift of big budget movies, and it's a male lead with a male and two female roles, and like a daughter and her best friend, and so it's a very ensemble cast. But at the time, Ron decided not to direct it. We could not literally get enough money. Everything is down to who's your actor, how much does that get you for, and if it's a domestic movie, you can't get any money for it. So there's all these other numbers at play now, and we actually saw a movie by a talented young actress, Lake Bell, who directed her first movie. And Lake kind of grew up in this New York society, which is very much where the film is set. She came read the script and came into the office and said, I want to make this for under $10 million, where no one could ever get their head around. Of course, it's a period New York beautiful movie, and we have to have so much money for it. And Lake came in and said, no. and look at all these great young actors I can cast, and I'm going to get a guy, and and she just, the way she talked about it, the spirit of it, we kind of, everyone sat there and went, Brian, myself, and another executive, we went, oh, it's the spirit of it. Okay, here's that indie spirit. So I think it's looking on a project by project basis and embracing it for what it can be, and thinking outside the box, and how can you actually shake it up and go, well, it doesn't have to be a big expensive movie. And I think that kind of forward thinking, male, female, it's that kind of indie spirit is seeping into right now, I think, with all of these changes that we've been talking about. And so I think opening those doors, embracing these opportunities and new ideas and how else can we do this is really important.
Was it me?
She's revising the draft right now, and we will hopefully be casting in a month.
That's fantastic.
I think the key to what you're saying.
That'll be coming your way.
Business cards are being passed.
I think the key that you're talking about, though, is her fearless spirit. And so you do have a small hurdle as a woman, that you're a woman. So that is a hurdle when you're in the room. It's like any minority at the moment or whatever. So that there's that perception that you bring in just by being your physical self. But you have to be not afraid to fail. That's such a great point. I mean, that's huge. And not everybody can get there. And you have to have had your failure and come back a few times before you start to make it into whatever club that is getting movies made, male or female. I mean, that's true for males, too. I mean, they have to, it's a tough business for them. This isn't like they have a cakewalk there and they're, anything's handed to them. Everybody has to work really hard to make it in the industry. I wish that we could find the way to help women to be more persistent, because they come in and, Hollywood in general is, fresh voice, fresh, it's like, oh, they've got a fresh voice when they start because they're excited and they're, and they just gobble that up and they eat it up and then they spit it out over here and go, what do you have now? And you're just, like reeling and then you start, you see them, that's when, like you were saying, that's when they start to drop off. It's like, how do we catch them on that first fall and help them to, I don't know why it seems to be, according to the numbers, that men are able to remain longer, but women drop off.
Well, maybe it would be instructive to ask you all, given that you were talking about, one mistake, you're out, and what you just said and what you said earlier, Claire, about you've got to give them the second and third chance. I'm just wondering if you have an experience that you want to share of when you botched it, bungled it, and how you came back from it. I mean, because that is the challenge, right? It's how do you come back from the disappointment? How do you come back from the failure? Anything come to mind?
What doesn't come to mind? Oh, I didn't mean that as an invitation to start, but I guess I will. I mean, literally, so many things came to mind. Just this film that I've just completed. I mean, it's been a long process in this film. Oh God, introvert. The complexities coming out. No, with this film, I mean, it goes into the creative process. I think it's really very difficult for me, at least, to untangle the failure, or difficulties or obstacles or hoops from the creative process and what I learned creatively. So, even though that's not the question, that's the only way I can answer it.
Well, I think
with
it's an
this.
important part of it,
but
it's process.
So with this film, it was a very long process, and with this film, I started the film knowing that I wanted. Anyway, it incorporates many different mediums: animation, film, video, stills. I mean, it's really has a lot of different things going for it, and it was over a long period of time, and it was inspired by a book, but then it took a life of its own. Filming in, almost on every continent, and it was just a very difficult process. And also bringing, how do I bring a man who's one of the main characters who's dead, how do I create an emotional connection between him and the viewers in a new way? Not just using the 5 archival photographs from, 1950. How do I really create a connection? So it became a real challenge. And so what happened is that then all of a sudden I had so much material, and the film wasn't working for a really long time. And I, thank goodness, was blessed with people who continued to believe in me even when the film wasn't working. But at even a certain time, that belief kind of waned. Like, hey, what's going on? This is taking a while. Can't you do? What's going on? And there was a point where I had to just reevaluate how to make this film, and one thing that I realized with this film was, okay, there's that phrase, killing your babies, and here I had to literally kill families, entire storylines, because in order for it to work, it was letting go. And that was a really difficult process to come, realization to come to, because you really get attached to these things, to characters and to scenes and to images. And even though I could have made 4 films with the material I had, literally 4 very strong films, that wasn't my goal. My goal was to really interweave them together. And when it wasn't working at a certain point, it was like, okay, we have to get rid of almost everything to see what's left and how I can make one story work. And so I think when I was at the point where I didn't know if it was going to work or not, it was about literally just letting go, letting go of as much as possible and streamlining the story. And so that was it. So, it's about finding that way. It's about finding that way. It's very difficult, but it is about finding the way in the story.
Which is what a great artist does, not necessarily man or woman. And that's great, and you came back from it because you're a good artist. And that's hard for men to do, too. I mean, but you did it, and...
Can I have another hug?
Supportive women. I have a really embarrassing female story. So I was working with an executive who will not be named. You know him, and you work with him.
Oh, I already know.
And it was a very difficult time on the project. It was very tense. A lot of money had already been spent, and the project was in a mess, and a terrible decision had just been made that we all had to live with. And I was the head writer on this project, and we're in a room, and when I heard that the decision had been made that we all knew was the wrong decision, and it was coming down from the woman who was the exec on the project at the time. She wasn't here, but she just made a terrible, terrible decision. And I think it was the fen-phen, because she was dieting. And I'm serious. So when I realized what was happening to the project, in this room, and they were asking me, it's like, well, how are we gonna make an end around this? But I saw that it was gonna kill the project. And it was a big studio project. I mean, the project was gonna go forward, but I knew it would not survive in any good way. And I started crying. And that I couldn't believe it. I was so, I even telling myself inside, okay, well, whatever you do, don't cry. I can feel it starting, but just don't, this is the little lips going. But I did, I started crying, right? And this guy, he just looked at me like in utter shock and horror, which made me cry more. And the worst thing about crying is that you can't speak. So it's just like awkward, like female estrogen just pouring into the room, and this poor man just having no idea what to do. And I was trying to find my voice, and he just left. He left the room.
I think I've cried in front of that same man. For sure.
He did not know what to do.
No.
Oh my gosh! And the only lesson I could take from he had to leave, and he called me had to go to Toronto for another shoot, and he called me that night and he was like, "What the hell was that?" I was like, "Well, blank. It was tears." But I mean, it's the female nightmare to cry in a room. Although I made peace with it on that day. And what I have tried to do since on a couple of occasions is if I feel like I'm going to cry, I have learned how to speak through it. And then it's like, okay, you know what? You can deal with it. If you can't deal with it, that's fine. But I'm crying. So what? There's water coming out of my eyes because I'm emotional. But I am now able to keep talking. Because women literally physically have a different tier thing that happens. And I think we have to, or I'll just speak for myself, I need to embrace it because it's not going to go away. Because the hardest part of being an artist is you have to remain vulnerable and raw or you don't create good art. So I'm not going to shut that down and become so calloused that I can survive in a room but I can't go write a script. That doesn't work. So Now, if I do cry, I just keep talking, and I just get to the end of it.
I think that's the next Hollywood workshop, that you can teach women to talk through crying.
Yeah.
I have actually done the same exact thing. That has been always a really big challenge for me because I am a very emotional person. Everyone actually laughs at, like, why are you on the producing side? Because you should be way more put together. And I have literally said to my bosses, I mean, I've had Brian say to me, what? Why are you so emotional? I say, I'm emotional. Get over it. Like, here's the problem, and da-da-da-da. You know, I'll be pitching my little heart out for whatever I believe in. A big mantra at Imagine is for thinking about movies is building your case, and it has been very, very helpful and effective because what I've realized is that all of these things are puzzles. They're not whatever they start out as are usually not what they end up as. And so once you figure that part out, you can kill your babies, let go of things, and you realize for the sake of what you want to put out in the world, you have to just keep reimagining it. It's like it's if anyone saw the movie yesterday, it's like starting in clay and erasing what you wrote. This isn't what I want. This isn't right. And I did live through that, you know, with my boss. And I am sitting there crying. And you're so emotional. You can't talk about this. This isn't making any sense. And I said, but it's not making sense. Not because I'm crying. It's not making sense because my case actually isn't that good. Okay, all right, get through it. Like whatever. And he said exactly. And I went. Now I have to go back and reimagine it. And how can I make this work? What piece isn't working? And so I think, again, because it's not a black and white business in any way, shape, or form, it's a creative business, and those two words don't really go together. I think so. You have to just keep thinking outside the box, and it's shape shifting, and I think it's true. I think everybody has their own process of that, and however you're going to get through it, embrace whatever it is you do and you're good at, because the best will come out of it.
One came up that, I mean, when I can't find the right person, or I do find the right person and the director doesn't get it. And I had a project that was autobiographical. The director was also the writer, and it was his story. And I had gotten him, it was about a father a guy who slept with a woman, and she got pregnant, and she didn't want the baby, and he decided that he wanted to raise this kid. So I got him Harvey Keitel. This is a low-budget movie. Got him Harvey Keitel to play his father. And we were looking for the male role, and Mark Ruffalo came in. And this was before Mark hit it with You Can Count on Me. And I'm sitting there watching Mark audition with my producer, and we're sitting there crying. He was so wonderful. The tears are just pouring down. And my director didn't get it at all. I mean, he was brilliant. He was just wonderful. And he wouldn't hire him because he didn't look like him. And he was so arrogant about the whole thing that the movie died. The movie didn't even get out. And it was so frustrating because he wouldn't listen to any of us. He just wanted somebody who looked like him. Not the talent, but looked like him. So it was really very frustrating. And I've had that on a couple of things where I've seen tons of women, and we couldn't find the right one, and settled with somebody, which is frustrating. But most of the time, it's when people don't listen to you, and it's it's a very intuitive thing for me. I know when something's right; it just feels right, and they don't listen. So
We all have to let go, because in some cases. So we have a half an hour left, and I want to make sure that everybody can get to the short program. So I'd love to open it up to questions and ask you for Hollywood gossip. Anybody? I think we can hear without the mics.
Yeah, I would love to hear a story like the most fulfilling, satisfying, creative experience that you had.
For me, on this film, I mean, the animation. I think working with the animators. The film is a very difficult subject matter. It's about genocide over a long period of time, and cover a number of instances. And the animation became just a joy, you know, because it became representative of so much, and it became how we were interweaving things throughout the film. And working with the animators and the editor, it was a team. And that give and take of ideas, and I'm going to get emotional because it was really just a wonderful experience of everyone working together, and then seeing it come through, and you know, and marrying the animation with also video and stills, and it was just an incredible experience. So, and I think that this film would have been very difficult to make without that. I think, you know. Structurally, and I think for the story, but also emotionally for me, you know, because it was just it was a wonderful thing to do. So I think both also working, it was the process of the team working together, and then also the results, and just the journey of it was great.
I think my very favorite was The Sessions that was out a couple of years ago. It was a very low budget film. It was $650,000, and we spent about 9 months looking for the lead male who was in a iron lung. And I don't know if you know the story, but it's about this man who wanted to, at 38 years old, lose his virginity, and he's in an iron lung. And we went out to all these big names, and I don't even think the names read it because it was so low budget. But about 9 months later, I had an epiphany that it was the actor John Hawkes, and persuaded the director, who was Australian, that he was the right guy. And he hadn't seen any of John's work. And then he saw Winter's Bone and some other things and thought the guy was really creepy. And but I convinced him to meet him, and I had called John and told him about the script and his agents and his managers, and he read it, and there was a love fest after that. They just fell in love, and it was so he was hired, and then Helen Hunt came on after 9 other people turned it down, and then Bill Macy. And then just filling in the rest of the cast was so sort of exhilarating. We used people who were really disabled. And it just turned out to be this most wonderful film. And to see it, it was like my swan song. I could leave now. And it was such a wonderful experience. And it turned out so wonderful that we were all at Sundance together crying our eyes out. And, it was great. It was great. It was really satisfying.
So there's a message. Okay to cry if you're a casting director or a documentary filmmaker. Otherwise.
I would actually say one of the most satisfying creative experience I've had actually happened recently. After seeing The Help, I really fell in love with Tate Taylor as a director, and I thought he did a beautiful job with that movie. I think it's really important to tackle really difficult subject matters and do it with humor, and I think he handled that beautifully. And so I had met with him a few times after that movie and gave him a couple scripts, trying to lure him into doing something. What else do you want to do, and what kind of stories are you looking for? And after a couple of attempts, we became friendly, and he was in Imagine for a television meeting. He actually was doing something on TV, which is separate, so not with me. And I sat with him in the lobby while he was waiting for the meeting to start. And he mentioned that he was flying to New York to meet with a very big singer, and she wanted to do a biography, wanted him to write and direct her autobiography. And it sparked something in me, and I thought, like, as many producers did, well, what do I have that could be like that? And we had just actually reacquired the rights to the James Brown story, and it was not a project that I worked on, but it's something that has been in Imagine since I started there. So Brian had been working on this passion project of his, and me being very incentivized to try to be in business with Tate Taylor, I said, well, if you're interested in that, we actually just got the rights back to this James Brown story. And I pitched him the story, and he said, okay, I'd like to read it right away. And he'll admit that he only read it to see what he shouldn't do in a biopic, because he was like, there's no way they got the James Brown story right. And he got on a plane, he was flying that afternoon, he got on a plane, he said, give it to me before I leave and I'll read it on the plane. At 8 o'clock at night, I'm at dinner, and Tate, my phone starts blowing up. Tate is calling me, his producing partner's calling me, oh my God, this is the greatest script we've read, this has to be my next movie. And it felt like such an accomplishment, so you have to just keep trying and see what sticks. But it wasn't a project that I hadn't developed it. And my boss, who was the president of Imagine, actually said to me, I 100% want you to be on this movie. And so she brought me on as the other executive, and we just made it, and she made sure I got my first executive producer credit. And so it was actually this thing that in doing something and knowing people you want to be in business with that you believe in, it worked, and then you're rewarded for it. So I'm really excited about the movie. I think it's really different, and who knows what everyone's going to think of it, but it was one of those experiences that I did it for the good of the movie and the good of the company and all of those things, and wanting us to be in business with him. And I was rewarded in such a great way by my bosses for doing that. I got to be a part of the whole process, which, was really exciting and feels so great. And again, you're doing things not necessarily you're doing it for the love of the business and the creative process. So knock on wood, you guys all like it working out. But it's, it's those things.
I don't, one day soon, I'll have a good experience. No, I have so many, but you know what I love hearing about it, all this, like, again, in common, what it is it's all at a time when you felt competent, and confident, and felt rewarded by making strong choices, and that they have worked out, which is male and female. That's, I think there's no right way to be male and there's no right way to be female, but the best way to work in this industry is to be confident and persistent, male or female, I think probably, that's a tough one because there's so many. Obviously, I wouldn't remain if there weren't so many great experiences, but just recently, too, I directed a spec TV pilot, and that was so rewarding to me because I got to use all the talent that I've known for all my years in Hollywood and with our theater in Orlando that we used to have, Morgan and I. And so I felt like it was a homecoming of talent that I loved, and that I was the queen because I was the director. So I got to tell them what to do and how to do it. And it was just, I felt like it was a coming together of all the experiences that I've had for the last years working in Hollywood gave me a knowledge and a competence. So I felt so confident, which is the best. I think that's the best feeling, and feeling in your element, is the best gift. If you feel like you're in your element, then you can help other people and give them a safe space to be vulnerable and raw and fail and come back again, and that's my favorite.
You talked a great deal about conversations about mentoring women. How about mentoring men? My first mentor, actually, when I first got out of college, was my stage manager, a woman, who just changed my life dramatically in all kinds of ways. So how do you approach that?
Very carefully. No, that's great. That's a great point, actually. That's even smarter in a sense. Well, it's as smart. That's very good. I don't think that's where I would go.
I had an assistant who was a male who I worked with for 8 years, and he became my partner. So, he was great and fabulous, and so brought him up he was an actor, and he just happened to start helping me on something and continued to work with me. And, I did that a few times.
I have to say that I have more women who apply to work with me than men, but I, of course, I mean, I think for me, it really isn't about the gender. It's about someone who really believes in, it's about a meeting, someone who believes in the project or believes in what we're trying to do, or just wants to be in in filmmaking and wants to make the film. So for me, at a certain point, it really doesn't become about the gender, and it shouldn't. You should really be nurturing people to be great filmmakers. Yeah.
I wonder about that. Would you rather be known as a filmmaker or a woman filmmaker?
Known in what way?
Not biblically.
Oh. Then as a filmmaker.
I mean, if you're doing your, I mean, it's a filmmaker, but I mean, it's kind of like, not saying the word feminism, you know what I mean? Or just, but, I was about to make a joke about it. I mean, like completely tongue-tied. No, I mean, I think I am a woman filmmaker, so it's stating the obvious, and then also, hopefully there's an adjective that precedes both.
But I think there's probably a draw for a young woman to become, to seek mentorship in another female filmmaker. I guess. But then you agree.
I think it's,
Sorry, there's.
I was going to answer, for me, filmmaker. I would hope that we can all just get to the point where we don't have to be unidentified by race, gender, or anything. Like the job is the job, but that's down the road, of course, so you do what you can to equalize the playing field as much as you can.
I actually want to cheat and I have two questions. One is actually kind of related to this. Do you feel like the younger generation of men coming into the industry are a little more enlightened and that we're getting closer to gender has nothing to do with it, that you're filmmakers or not? And then my second question is, when you do come across in your dealings with a man who is really just going to treat you like a woman and a lesser person because you're a woman, do you try and work through that relationship, or you just, I'm going to go find a relationship where I'm going to be on equal footing?
I think it's someone that's going to treat you in a lesser manner because you're a woman is just not a person in a good space. You probably, and then they're probably treating men that badly too, but you think it's because you're a woman. Or even if it is actually because you're a woman, they're not going to be a good person to work with, even if you're a man. So that's not going to work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the younger generation absolutely has far fewer barriers than, I mean, it's amazing, the kids that I encounter now as interns, and they don't talk about the same things. They don't think in that way. They don't think about, I mean, it's about sexuality, it's about gender. I mean, it is just, walls really are coming down. I think there's an accessibility, again, with technology and just kind of where they are in their lives. They're free to try more things and not be judged for it. And I do find that they at least everyone I've encountered feels like they really are not afraid to be just who they are in a different way. And I don't feel like I'm so much older than them, but when you see that generation shift, you're like, it's pretty impressive.
So we talked about how maybe you don't want to use your femininity or don't want to bring that up in some instances, but are there cases when you feel like, I'm going to rock this because I'm a hot woman and I'm going in here and I'm going to use it? Like, do you feel like sometimes when you were going for money and these grants are totally...
Joke. Are you going to prostitute yourself?
No, but like in these situations where you're applying for funding and you're in this really conservative environment and maybe there's all these men and you're going to use the fact that you're this beautiful woman walking in there. I mean, do you feel that you can use it sometimes, or is that just you don't even want to cross that line?
Really joke, right now, joke.
I think...
it can work against you. It can often work against you. I think there was just something in the Times, I don't remember it, I wish I should have jotted it down, but that, that they were doing a study, and it was in the banking world mostly, I think, and it was, it was in the tech. No, but it was that men would pitch the same idea. A man would get the most equity, right? And then it was a woman would get the least, less, and the most attractive woman would get even less. So that was when they were doing that. It was just that still these social barriers exist. I have to say, I really think that it comes to, confidence, the storytelling, the confidence, and being able to pitch. And even if I'm going for money from, people who are working in foundations or whatever, I'm pitching it probably the same way that I would to an executive, right? It's still the story that drives people. So, and I think just going to your question earlier about, working through it, for me at least, I don't really know, well, yes, you do know, if, and it's usually older men, who are in a different generation. I try and at least work through it, just because I'm also a glutton for punishment, and I'm always like, no, we can do it, we can convince them, so what if they believe that we should, be washing dishes all day long? You know what I mean? We'll show them that that he's wrong. So, but I think it's really just about being prepared in every respect of the storytelling and trying, my God. Someone's going to answer this better, I think.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
You definitely benefit sometimes from being like the cute young girl.
Yes, it has happened, and believe me, like I've actually been put up and challenged for it. Again, one of my first movies as an executive, it was, well, should you really be here? And it only makes me work 10 times harder to actually be the cute girl in the room, because I have to prove that I'm not just that. So while I have never changed the way I dress or what like that kind of thing, I don't downplay any of that, but I do feel like I have to work actually harder to be seen as a creatively competent person. I think you have to. I think for the most part, if anyone is giving you a job for the way you look or giving you things for the way you look, long term, it's not going to be a good relationship no matter what. Like you said, I think it's so I would rather let them know exactly what I want to do, and creatively, if you're not on the same page, like, okay, let's not do this because of one thing. So I actually try not to like play up or down either way. I don't try to make myself more ugly when I
And I only get the jobs because I am the cute young thing.
Being as women are seen as more emotional, do you think that hurts or helps you to progress?
I think it can do both, personally. Absolutely. I think again, going back to the fact that it's a creative business, I think so much of storytelling is from your gut, like you said, like it is, you have to have, the reason any movie works is because you have an emotional response to it. And I think so for me, I absolutely play up to that. I use it all the time. And if something makes me cry, I go with it. Great, this is amazing. And I've been known to cry in a staff meeting. It's kind of actually a running joke at my company because I'm a little bit of a mess. But I try to, for personally, creatively, I just go, okay, why did that make me react? And look at it from just a storytelling point of view. If I'm reacting to it, is it just because of in the moment or something bigger and it's reaching me emotionally on a level that can reach other people? Is it because of my personal experience, or is it maybe a more universal thing? Because we, at least for me, especially in the movies we make and imagine, it's very much, we want populist movies. We want a lot of people to see them and a lot of people to understand them. We talk about 8 Mile a lot in our company because, for the most part, general America wasn't probably that interested in a white rapper from Detroit. Like, they don't really necessarily, older audiences, and it did very well with older audiences because it was a coming of age story. It was about a boy who didn't fit in and knew he wanted to do this one thing, and most people can relate to that. So I try to tap into those emotional responses of, okay, what is that about? Is it something that just I'm reacting to personally, something in my life, or can I make it a universal thing that'll work for the project? So I don't run away from it. Oh wait, she's gonna have her serious response.
Oh, I'll just make it quick. No, I think that it's for me, I think that, my emotion and my passion, it's why I'm able to work with such amazing people, because they also have that emotion and passion. But I also think that when I'm raising money or I'm dealing with people on, on a different level, that I'm also fortunate to be with those people that I can, first have that emotional response to them and kind of taper it down, at another point. Because it's, because for the thing, it can work for you, and so you really have to know when it can and when not, and you have to know yourself. And I'm immediately, so I need to know, okay, I'll get that out, and then I can go on.
And I'm the same way with casting. If an actor comes in and blows me away, I could be sitting there crying my eyes out, and I have. And I'm very passionate. If I believe in someone, I will fight to the depths for them. And that's part of who I am.
Oh, yeah. Were there any moments as a woman of uncertainty going into like the film business, knowing that you were a woman?
Well, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty. I don't know if it was because I was a woman that I was uncertain, but and what Edith was just saying is so smart, to surround yourself with people that you feel that you can be yourself with, so you don't form habits that you are not you. So I certainly did that when I started out. I made sure that I was working with people that I felt safe as who I was while I was developing my voice. And I was scared. I was scared going in, definitely, because it's a big, scary business, and I wasn't sure I could make it or that I could last. But surround yourself with people that you are safe with.
And do what you love. That is what it all comes down to. For me, it was never about being a woman. It was all about. I'm still terrified in certain situations.
Right.
Like, every time I do something new, I'm like, I definitely can't do this. But you just have to, again, lose the fear of failure. Surround yourself with people that creatively support you and understand you, and believe in what you're saying and doing. And if you don't, you'll never be able to sell it to someone else.
Right.
So do what you love.
Sorry, I just, Penelope Cruz said, she always is scared and has this uncertainty before she starts a project, and she hopes she never loses it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so true, because it's really something that you do have it, but then learning how to, someone, and I also heard someone else say, shake hands with that fear, and then moving forward. But it's learning to, I guess, let it work for you too.
And just, don't make major decisions on your period. I mean, that's all.
I know. Amazing.
I want to make sure everybody can get over to the short film panel. So I want to thank Anna Cope, Ronnie Yeskel, Claire, Sarah, and Edith Belsberg.